Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and tonight's movie tells the legend of a barbarian warrior on a quest to avenge himself upon those who destroyed his village. With the help of an eagle, a tiger covered in hair dye, and a pair of weasels. From 1982, it is, of course, The Beastmaster. Now before we go much further, let me just apologise. I'm actually fighting off a head cold right now, so if I do start gurgling a bit like this, that's the reason why, okay? So I hope it's not going to spoil your enjoyment of the episode too much, so here we go. The Beastmaster was directed by Don Coscarelli. I discussed his career in the Real Obscure episode on Phantasm, but if you're one of the few people who haven't heard that episode, go check it out now to learn more. But here's the Cliff Notes version. Coscarelli broke into movie making with his debut feature, Jim the World's Greatest, at the age of just 19. The movie was a critical and financial success and was followed up by his second feature, Kenny and Company, in 1976. He's probably best known for his 1979 horror masterpiece, Phantasm, along with its sequels, plus John Dies at the End and Bubba Hotep. The script for Beastmaster was inspired by the novel series by author Andre Norton, aka Alice Norton, who published the first of the Beastmaster series, 2 words, in 1959. However, Norton's lead character was a radically different figure, with Hostine Storm being a Navajo Army veteran and space traveller who shares a telepathic bond with a group of animals. Norton asked for her name to be removed from the movie script as she felt Coscarelli and co-scriptwriter Paul Pepperman had made too many changes to the character and setting, although she did allow her name to appear on the titles of the sequel, Beastmaster 2 Through the Portal of Time, presumably due to its sci-fi elements, or the original movie's success. Coscarelli and Pepperman had completed their script in the early 80s and began to seek funding at the Milan and Cannes film festivals, eventually raising $9 million for the project, the biggest budget Coscarelli had worked with up until that point. However, having producers on board funding the project, most of Coscarelli's previous works had been funded by the filmmaker himself, led to clashes over some decisions in the movie's development. But we'll come back to that later. So, what's it all about? The movie opens with a suitably stirring and epic theme tune written by Lee Holridge of Mr. Mom, Splash and Moonlighting fame. Although it veers dangerously close to the 1970s version of the Battlestar Galactica theme, it does a good job capturing the fantasy adventure feel and is quite catchy. Anyway, after a montage featuring stills of various animals as the credits roll, the movie begins. In the fantasy kingdom of Aruk, it is prophesied that the evil high priest of Ar, Mayax, will die at the hand of the unborn son of Arak's king Zed. Mayax commands one of his witches to deal with the child, but before the plan can be carried out, King Zed discovers Mayax's plans to sacrifice a child and banishes him from Aruk. However, that night Mayax's witch visits the chambers of King Zed and his queen, where she magically steals the unborn child from the queen's womb and translocates it into the womb of a cow. It's a very weird scene, but in the best possible way. It has the feel of a story from classical mythology, like the origin of a demigod or similar mythic character, and we immediately see Coscarelli's flair for creative, albeit sometimes off-kilter, storytelling in this introduction. Sometime later, the child having been cut from the cow, the witch is found about her work by a local villager, who, hearing the screams as the baby has his hand branded with the mark of R, saves the child. Bringing him home to his village, he raises him as his own, but soon realises that there is more to this child than first appears, when he is able to communicate with and control a wild bear during an attack. The child, who he names Dar, grows to manhood, but when the rampaging Jun forces, who are in league with Mayax, who at some point overthrows Zed and takes power, ransack the village, Dar is left as the sole survivor and so vows his revenge. The role of Dar, the Beastmaster, is played by Mark Singer. He began his career in television, appearing in guest roles in such shows as Planet of the Apes, Hawaii Five-0, and Columbo. The Beastmaster was his big break into movies, and he later appeared in the 2 sequels. Aside from playing the titular Beastmaster in the movie trilogy, Singer is probably best known for portraying Mike Donovan in the original series of V. And he also provided the voice of Kirk Langstrom, aka the Man-Bat, in Batman the Animated Series. He would later return to the Beastmaster TV show in a guest role, playing the role of Dartanus, mentor to the show's version of Dar. The movie's antagonist Mayax is played by Rip Torn, an actor whose TV, movie and theatre career spanned decades and is far too long for me to go into here. But a few of his more recognisable roles include appearances in The Man Who Fell to Earth, Airplane 2, Men in Black, and Dodgeball. And while we're doing our cast rundown, the role of King Zed is played by Rod Loomis, who you probably won't recognise under all the makeup, but he played Sigmund Frood Dude in the most excellent Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Anyway, back to the movie. Along his path to vengeance, Dar recruits a number of animal companions: an eagle, a pair of ferrets, and a black panther. But working with so many animals on set did cause some problems for the production team. Dar's eagle, for example, would not take off on command, and so most of the flying scenes started with it simply being dropped from a height, thus forcing it to fly or fall to its death. Ferrets are basically impossible to train, and so they used a cast of around 25 different animals, who usually enticed to move by a trainer, waving treats at them off camera. Similarly, panthers aren't good at following commands, and so, as I mentioned in the episode's intro, the panther was actually played by a tiger treated with black hair dye, from Clairol, because tigers are more docile. Or as docile as any 600-pound wildcat can be. And the scene where the young Dar tames a bear was shot on the first day of filming for Singer, and during the scene, the bear went rogue and attacked its handler. The crew were forced to flee and hide, and when the situation was eventually resolved, Singer was called over and told, "Okay, you're up." Anyway, on his journey, Dar also meets a slave girl named Kiri, played by Tanya Roberts. Roberts began her career in commercials before moving into television and a few smaller movie roles. She appeared in 1979's Tourist Trap, which also saw an early uncredited role for Linnea Quigley, but rose to fame appearing in the TV show Charlie's Angels as the character Julie Rogers, which she followed up with her appearance in The Beastmaster. Interestingly, the producers also arranged for her to appear in Playboy to help promote the movie, although by the time the shoot went to print, the movie had already finished its theatrical run. Now, I know what you're thinking. How was an appearance in Playboy going to help promote this PG-rated fantasy movie for kids? Well, for those of you who haven't seen The Beastmaster, then you might be shocked to learn it's way more adult than the advertising may lead you to believe, and that it actually features Tanya Roberts appearing topless in a few scenes, and even showing a little bit more at times. Because this is where things get really weird tonally. On the one hand, we have a movie that features full frontal nudity, even if it's brief or accidental. A child being thrown into a fire? I kid you not. and witches gyrating wearing very little other than masks and skimpy tabards. But at the same time, it has camp heroic adventure, comedy weasels, and a lead character who seems to have the emotional development of a 14-year-old, and at one point cries because somebody calls him a freak. Now I have a theory about this. Coscarelli made his name focusing on dramas featuring younger, adolescent characters, with even his masterpiece Phantasm being a story about a 14-year-old kid, even if Phantasm's Mike acts as if he's older. Given Coscarelli originally wanted the then 18-year-old Demi Moore to play the female lead, I'm wondering if he had also envisaged Dar as being played by someone of a similar age. Now hear me out. You see, having Dar as a character in his late teens or even early 20s would explain a lot about his behaviour. At that age he'd be inexperienced in the ways of the world, such as the way he looks at his adoptive father's sword like he's never seen a sword, why he would speak in this somewhat juvenile way, and why he still at times acts like a big kid. But it would also put him at the age where more adult elements like fighting and having a romantic interest in Kiri still work. This is the reason why so many horror movies have college kids or young adult characters in them. They're old enough to do all the grown-up stuff like driving, going off to a cabin with friends, or having romantic relationships, but are also still inexperienced enough to make mistakes like wandering off into those woods by themselves or reading rituals from cursed books. Now Coscarelli did apparently select Singer himself after seeing him on stage and felt his physical presence and ability to perform his own stunts would make him ideal for the role. But did he originally envisage Dar as a young adult character, but then later choose Singer because the producers had cast the 30-something Tanya Roberts as his romantic lead? I don't know. However, if that were the case, then it would explain a lot. Anyway, as I mentioned, as he is tracking the Jun horde, Dar encounters the bathing Kiri and another woman, who apparently is only here to add a second pair of boobs to proceedings as she's never seen again. Using his Beastmaster powers, he commands his weasels to steal her clothes, and when she emerges from the water in little more than a bit of sackcloth underwear, he uses his panther to scare her into his arms. Again, it's the juvenile behaviour you'd expect from an 18-year-old, but it just feels immature when it's a 30-something-year-old man doing it. Anyway, after fighting off his playful advances, Kiri runs away, telling Dar that the priests of Ar will kill him if he follows her. But follow her he does. Losing track of Kiri, he finds his way to a strange tree, where a group of bat, moth, eagle men live, devouring any they encounter by enveloping them and then digesting their victims within the folds of their wings. However, when they see Dar's eagle, they reward him with his life and a strange bird-headed talisman before sending him on his way. Now this is another one of those moments where you see Coscarelli's eye for a weird and creepy visual. The winged creatures look really cool. They remind me a little of the Mayhaws from the 1976 adaptation of At the Earth's Core, and that's another movie I'm hoping to get to soon. And even though they're just men in costumes, they're pretty great costumes. And kudos to the actors who portray them, as their stillness and then quick, limited movements really do convey the sense of an animal stalking its prey. Anyway, following this encounter, he continues on his way and meets a warrior named Seth and his young charge, Tal. Seth is portrayed by John Amos. A veteran of television and film, you'll probably recognise him from his portrayal of the older Kunta Kinte in Roots, as Major Grant in Die Hard 2, and Cleo McDowell in Coming to America. Tal is played by Joshua Milrad. Although he was nominated for the Best Young Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture by the Young Artist Awards, his acting career was relatively short. He has since moved to working behind the camera as an editor, producer and director. Dar learns that Tal is the son of King Zed, although keep in mind Dar knows nothing of his heritage and doesn't realise Tal is his half-brother, and that Kiri is Tal's cousin, which might sound a bit Alabama to you, but given Tal doesn't share the same mother as Dar, it's possible the two are not related by blood, but still. Tal and Seth are attempting to rally an army to rescue the imprisoned King Zed from Mayax, who rules Arok as a theocracy, and so the three band together on a quest to save the kingdom from the rule of the evil High Priest and his disciples. Anyway, this is probably a good time to jump into the spoiler zone. While Seth goes off to continue his attempts to raise an army, Dar, Tal and Kiri, along with his animal friends, enter Mayax's lair to rescue King Zed. Along the way they encounter all manner of trials, including deadly traps and Mayax's death guards, warriors who've been poisoned with brain leeches and then kitted out in S&M leather gear, resulting in them being unstoppable angry brutes. The look, despite the kitsch kinkiness of them, is actually kind of cool. Even though they predate them by a few years, they look like Masters of the Universe figures. And actually, now I think about it, Dar looks more like He-Man than the new He-Man does. Again, it demonstrates Coscarelli's gift for fantastic visuals, and for all their weird S&M silliness, the movie does a good job portraying them as unstoppable killing machines. They're able to free King Zed, but, fueled by anger over his wife's death, he refuses to accept any other form of action than an all-out assault on Mayax's fortress, which is a suicide mission, given how few soldiers he has at his command. When Dar counsels a more prudent approach, Zed accuses him of cowardice and calls him a freak due to his ability to communicate with his animal friends. So Dar runs away and starts crying about it. Now look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with men showing emotions or crying. I bawl like a baby every time I watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, extended editions natch, but this scene comes off as one of those tonally odd moments I spoke of. I could see this working for a younger Dar, but a 30-something-year-old man acting like an upset teenager just seems weird to me. Anyway, Zed's forces are of course defeated, and so Dar resolves to rescue the king from being sacrificed. He is able to sneak into the city and scale the temple steps, but during the conflict, Mayax does a reverse "Obi-Wan never told you" bit, and reveals to Zed that Dar is his son, and then as Dar watches, he kills him. Dar and Mayax fight, with the latter eventually being stabbed. However, one of his witches revives him using magic, and as Dar carries Kiri away from the conflict, he attempts to stab him in the back. But Kodo, one of Dar's heroic ferrets, leaps at Mayax, bites his neck, and sends him plunging into the sacrificial fire, giving his life to save Dar. But all is not over yet, for the Jun hordes are to return that night, and so the villagers spend the day preparing for battle, setting a trap using the flammable quagmire around the village. As night falls, the Jun horde arrives, and the battle begins. Now, for all its low-budget trappings, this sequence is probably one of the best executed in the movie, and it's just a shame it comes right at the end, essentially after the main story has ended, as it's really quite exciting, featuring some great stunt work, fantastic horsemanship, and pretty cool fight sequences. Anyway, our heroes and the villagers fight well, but the horde is just too great for them to overcome. But as all seems lost, Dar's eagle returns with the proverbial cavalry, in the form of the moth, bird, bat, men things, who quickly dispatch the remaining Jun and thus save the day. With the Jun defeated, Seth, knowing the truth, offers the throne to Dar, but he declines, saying Tal will make a better king than he, and so he leaves with Kiri and his animal friends, including Podo, who has given birth to 2 ferret cubs. Now, if Coscarelli had had his way, this would have been a very different movie. As I said earlier, he wanted to cast a young Demi Moore as Kiri, but was overruled by executives who cast Tanya Roberts instead. Klaus Kinski was his first choice for Mayax, but the role eventually went to Rip Torn. And Coscarelli clashed with the studio over the movie's editing. And I think it's here in particular that they should have listened to him, as the final movie seems very uneven in terms of the story and action. Yes, I know he co-authored the screenplay and this was his story structure, but sometimes what's on paper doesn't always work on film, and I suspect Coscarelli knew this, which is why he advocated for a different cut. There's certainly an intriguing opening, and the first Jun attack is pretty well staged. But then it seems to sag in the middle, and even what should have been the climax with Dar fighting Mayax just feels a little underwhelming. But the end charge of the Jun and the battle set against the wall of flame is visually impressive and plot-wise quite engaging. It just feels as if it's a little tagged on though. Okay, so the Beastmaster is not without its flaws, but you cannot understate the influence this movie has had on pop culture, particularly on tabletop and video game RPGs. Dar is essentially the archetypal pet class, years before D&D introduced the concept, and the idea of a character commanding a beast to aid them has become a staple of fantasy gaming. I'm sure many gamers who play as druids or hunter classes in various RPGs do so because they saw this movie. And The Beastmaster is certainly one of the better fantasy films released in the early 80s. I know I probably don't need to offer a recommendation for this movie, because if you're part of this channel's demographic, then you'll have already seen it many times, probably on a rainy Sunday afternoon when HBO, or hey, Beastmaster's on, as it was jokingly called, was showing it for the 700th time that week. But if you haven't seen it, then give it a watch, as if you can overlook the minor issues with saggy pacing and juvenile characterisation, you won't be disappointed. And yes, it may not be Conan the Barbarian, but at least it's not bloody Conquest. And on that note, thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on the next Real Obscure. This episode of Real Obscure was written, produced, directed, and tamed using magical powers by me, Kevin H. Shaw. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help support the show, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe, as this really helps the show grow. You can learn more about the podcast by visiting realobscurepod.com, and you can share your thoughts by emailing me at hellorealobscure@gmail.com. You'll also find me on Blue Sky using the handle @realobscurepod, so come on over there and join in the fun. The Beastmaster is copyright 1982. All content here is used for educational and commentary purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, Fair Use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holders. Presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary, and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended, so please don't sue me or make me record another episode with a bloody head cold.